Billie, I'd like to start by talking about your journey as an artist. You were formerly trained as a printmaker, and then you spent some time in the fashion industry, but maybe one of your earliest and most poignant influences was your mother's sewing group. Can you elaborate a little on your experience of bearing witness to the transformative power of those gatherings?
I actually never realized at the time how important watching my mother's sewing group would be, and that it would end up being the way in which I would choose to express myself. But when I was about 5 years old and we still lived in Malawi, my mom was hosting her sewing group, and I was a very, very curious child, and I wasn't allowed to be there, but I kind of snuck into the room and hid in the windowsill behind the curtain because, I couldn't curb my curiosity. I wanted to know what these women do, behind the closed doors when they're all getting together and having their tea and scones and stuff. So as I sat there and the women came in, at the beginning they were all sharing like all their kind of trials and tribulations at home, whether it was marital issues or just like money issues, just like different types of challenges. And, it was quite emotional and charged in the room. But then after the ladies had been sewing for a little while, suddenly all the conversation stopped. And it just became so quiet and peaceful, and everyone was just so centered. And I found that really remarkable. Like, I really took note of that. And I said, there's something about this sewing thing that's really quite powerful. But of course, it's like I put it in the back of my mind for a long time, and I never really thought about it again. But then when I was in primary school in Zimbabwe, my school there used to offer what they called arts and crafts, which was basically different types of sewing techniques. And I just thought this was an awesome opportunity for me to learn how to sew with my peers, because that was the thing that I saw with my mom, was that she was doing her sewing with her peers. And actually I never asked my mom to teach me to sew, because I think I really wanted to learn with like girls my own age, because boys weren't doing the sewing at the time. So that's when I actually started learning to sew myself, was around the age of about 8 years old. And then when we moved to Botswana, I also did the sewing. So I just kept doing the sewing thing as an afternoon activity. And I really enjoyed it. And part of the enjoyment was actually having a product at the end of it. So it's like I made a top and I could wear it, and I'd be like, oh, I've made this top. I made a bag. And actually my mom had kept like this little kind of like table decoration that I made, and I think I have to frame it and put it somewhere just as a reminder of my beginnings.
Did you in your primary school sewing circle like emulate the discussions? Like in America we call it stitch and bitch. You get together, you all know this, you get together and you're knitting or you're sewing, you're doing something together. So did that translate to you?
I was too young to have issues, I think.
You didn't talk about your teachers.
Yeah, so it was more the enjoyment, because it's like you got to go and pick your own fabric. So sometimes I would go with a couple of girlfriends and we'd go to the shop on a Saturday, and then we'd be like, oh, I'm going to take this fabric, and they're like, no, I'm picking this fabric. And then we like look at each other's things and go, oh, that fabric looks so good. So, we were kind of just like, just like encouraging each other. So that was more the energy. But, we had like, what were we going to say? It's such a hot day in Botswana today. Oh, my God. So
that makes sense.
No.
But Billie, there's such poetry to your mark making. And a visitor said last evening, he described your work as present. It has this beautiful presence to it. And I believe that it definitely has a lot to do with your material. And so can you share in your own words how you came to start working with silk, and then how silk as a medium connects metaphorically to your practice?
So I started working with silk, fabric in general in the beginning, just really out of necessity, because I had no access to studio space or equipment or anything like that, and printmaking wasn't really an option for me. And the only spaces I had really were like my bedroom in my father's house and maybe like the patio. So those were the two spaces where I could work. So I started thinking like, what material could I use, that would be easy to pack away, to clean up after. And because, I'd been doing the sewing and I had a love of haute couture and fashion. So fabric was always, and also another thing is that the paper that I was working with at Varsity was so diverse, like the textures. So I think that was also why it just made sense that I would then work with textile, because it's quite similar in that there's a tactility there. So initially a friend of mine like gave me a satin that her grandmother had left her, and I would embroider some like plants and insects and stuff like that and birds that I saw in my garden, and I made little bags out of it. And then when I moved to Johannesburg and I was working at Diesel's, I was a shop assistant, and I had a day off, and my friend who was an interior designer called me up and she said, "Oh, come spend the day with me. I need to source fabrics. Why don't you come with me and then we can spend the time together?" So I was like, why not? Fabric shops, how exciting. And then I can see how she works. So when I went with her to all the different places, I had a look around and I stumbled upon some silk swatches. And I was looking at them, and the shop owner was like, they're free, you can take some. So I was like, oh, great, free. So I took some, and then we went to a few places. I mean, I didn't want to like take too many, just because, you get a hand and you take the whole arm. No, it doesn't work like that. So then at each place I went to, I would just take a few samples. And then when I got home at the end of the day and I looked at how they played with the light, I was really quite moved. And it just reminded me of like the nuance of paint. You know how like when you mix your paint on a palette, it's never quite the same. It's always like slightly different. And I just felt like the way it was playing with the light, it had like a similar kind of feeling. So that really grabbed my attention. And also because of the shape of the swatches, it started making me think of the buildings in downtown Joburg with the glass panels and stuff. So then I was like, oh, maybe I'll make like architectural, textile pieces, depicting the Joburg cityscape. So that's actually how I started working with silk, was doing cityscapes of different parts of downtown Joburg, just because I was obsessed with urban decay and I really loved like the language of the city and the fire escapes and stuff like that. I was quite fascinated because I had lived a very suburban life, with like houses and gardens and stuff. I'd never lived in the city. And that was really the beginning. And as time went on, I was like, oh, now that I've set the scene of my story, maybe I can start telling my experiences in it as the person who lives in this space. And in a way, that's where I kind of started to find catharsis in like negative experiences or difficulties in relationships or any kind of questions I had about anything that was happening around me. And I just realized that when I explored those things through my work, at the end of the work, it was almost like those negative feelings had been put into the work, and then I was free, light-hearted and kind of in a way healed from the experience, if I can say that. Like I'd experienced a form of therapy through creating a work. And then, I'm a very slow artist, so the dots really they're far apart, they're not close together. So then after a while, I was like, it's so interesting because silk is a product of transformation, and I'm like transforming things into like works of art and like works of art that just make me feel so good, and they lift my self-esteem, and they might transform me from feeling helpless and to like be feeling empowered. So then that's when I was like, that which I was seeking me. So silk and I literally had a rendezvous, and I just had to show up.
I love that story. And Billie, there's so many things that draw me to your work. Having them in the house now, you could really experience the way that they breathe, and there's a life to them, or as a visitor said last night, a presence. But your use of color and composition and texture and the silks, there's, an intimacy to them, just as an object, but also the subject and the scenes that you're sharing. But I think beyond the beauty of them as objects, there's a universality to your work, and a gorgeous offering of ways to engage with them. There's accessibility through representation. You're portraying scenes, everyday scenes that all of us can relate to: motherhood, sisterhood, love, life, friendship. You tell really personal stories, and it opens. It's an opening for emotional recognition and a dialogue with the works. And in fact, that was the feedback I was getting the most last night is the resonance and the feeling that people have just standing before them. They're really alive. And so I was wondering if you could, talk to us a little bit and share your thoughts about the self-healing nature of your autobiographical work. I mean, you touched on it a moment ago, but I think there's more to be said.
Well, actually, I just want to go back a little bit and say that after I'd worked in all the different industries and I always got a little bit bored, I said to my boyfriend at the time, I said, I'm thinking of going back to art full time. And he said, oh, but Billie, like, you're not political. Like, what's your art going to be about, So then I thought about it and I thought, that's actually a good point because I didn't grow up in apartheid South Africa. And at the time, a lot of the work was about apartheid. All the South African artists of different skin tone were kind of dealing with that subject. And I felt it wouldn't be authentic for me to deal with that subject because it actually was not my experience personally. So then I thought about it and I said, actually, like, I'm going to make works about myself because that is something that I know about. It's like, it's me. And so that's, I guess in a way, that's when I started doing the kind of the autobiography. But I also think that in a way it was also to kind of start conversations about things that were previously considered taboo. It's like when your boyfriend breaks up with you, whatever, you're supposed to just go and cry on your own and then come back out into the world when you're feeling happy again. You can't be like, oh, I'm so like devastated, my boyfriend broke up with me. And I'm just like, rejection, it's a thing, it happens. So let's share it. Let's like all get together and cry together and be like, yeah, my boyfriend also broke up with me. So that was one of the reasons why I was telling my personal stories, was to encourage other people to also speak up about their experiences, to kind of take away that shame, where we kind of like, we hide the horrible things that happen to us because we're just too ashamed of how other people will see us if we talk about them. And another thing that kind of started developing for me was just really about, because I just started to think about how the world relates to me as a Black African woman and how it has so many challenges for me. And I was just like, this is a great opportunity to humanize that sector of our society by saying, hey, like, I have these experiences. These are the daily things I do every day that you also do. So actually we have a lot in common and I'm just a person just like you. So can you just treat me like a person? So that was also one of the reasons that I was telling, my personal stories, was to humanize Black African women or Black women in general. And then, with all of that, I had my son, which was like a really big thing for me. And I was compelled to just tell the whole world how amazing it was and how I was just so in love with my baby. And it was just like, oh my God, like I just can't contain myself. I have to share this. So in Africa, there's this taboo. You're not allowed to celebrate your child. Like they say, oh no, it's a bad omen. You can't do that. And my male lecturer as well was like, oh no, too sentimental. Like, it's going to ruin your career. So I sat with this for like a month. And then I was like, you know what? No one's holding me back. I'll take the risk. I will risk like attracting negative energy towards me by just saying the most incredible thing has happened to me. And so I made a work called Ma Vie en Rose, where I am feeding my son a bottle. I'm preparing a bottle for my son at like 3 a.m. or something. And actually people responded to it so well because I think like female artists were like, I'm not allowed to talk about how much I love my baby. I just have to make art like I'm not a mother, like I have to separate. So I think it just really made everyone feel like, oh, now let me just talk about my baby already. So it, it opened the doors for us to actually just share things that we couldn't share before. And universal things, like that, like, the struggle of like teaching your child during the lockdown. So the work Heart of the Home is about all that. And then so many parents could relate to that because they also struggled to like teach their children, and then relationships became a bit difficult with their children because now suddenly you're a teacher and you're criticizing them. So it was just really, really challenging, and a lot of people really appreciated that. So I suppose for me, connection is really important, and sharing and like having a larger community. And that's why I make the work I do, to connect us to each other.
Your boyfriend knew nothing.
Yeah, he was a stronzo.
Yeah, because it's really brave. Taking the personal and making it public is a political action. Art in itself, just for what it is political. Just to be creative and bring beauty into the world. So
I just think he
I
never
hope
knew what
you
I was
broke up
capable
with
of.
him.
Yes, but
But also I just want to say that there's real strength and courage and power and vulnerability, and you can feel it. You can feel it in your work and in your presence. So thank you for sharing that with us.
and I just want to say it was actually really important for me to show my vulnerability because I tend to be a very closed kind of person. I'm an introvert and I don't let people in. And so people always like read me wrong and stuff. And I just thought maybe I should just create a balance. Maybe I should like share and then I can go back to being closed. So then I can find a balance in life.
Is it working?
Very well.
Oh, good. So I'd like to start with, Field of Dreams. It's also the title of a Kevin Costner film from the 1980s. And so, is there correlation between those two things? And can you just tell us why you chose Field of Dreams as the title of this work?
Well, basically, Field of Dreams is my wish for the world, I wish that we could all live in harmony and just live as one community instead of like all the awful things that we do to each other because of some kind of cultural difference or skin tone. And I think for me specifically at the time, I know a lot has happened since then, but Black Lives Matter was really, really depressing for me because I was just like, it's really sad that a group of people have to go out and protest just to like be seen and have equal rights. And I wasn't even sure whether it was going to make any difference. I think that was the most depressing thing for me, was I wasn't really sure if it was really gonna have any like long-lasting impact. And so I was like, so this is my field of dreams, because I'm like, if I build this dream where we all live together harmoniously, maybe it can happen. So if you build it, they will come. So that's kind of the idea. And I think that, that's also why I incorporated the mirrors, because I'm like, when people look at in the mirrors and then they do their selfie, then they also become a part of the field of dreams. So it's like we're all working together to realize what might sound like a fantasy, but, it's worth a try.
Yeah, thank you. What we're looking at on the screen is a shot I took with my cell phone, so forgive the quality of the photograph, but it's installed in the museum space now, and it's a grouping of portraits. It's almost like family portraits. Can you talk a little bit about these the people in the portraits and who you chose to make?
So this is really like my greater community, my family at large. In the work is my son's godmother, Jody, who is, so basically the whole idea is that there is no such thing as a pure European, a pure African, a pure whatever. Like we're all completely just mixed. And I'm sure if we had to like do like a gene test, we would find out that we've got like, genes we never knew we had. So basically everyone in my family is like of mixed origins in a way, even though they may look European or whatever, but they're actually like, they're mixed. So, so my friend Jody is South African, but she's originally Australian, but she has Italian and Irish and Russian blood and I don't know what else, but she's a mix. And then there is Nika's godfather, Dion, who's Asian, but he's like Asian South African, and he was born in South Africa, and he's only ever lived in South Africa, but his grandparents had come from China. But he does not identify as Chinese, he identifies as South African. And then there is my son. I had to put him in because I always have to put my son in everything. But he's, he's part Sotho, so South African, black, but he's also part white South African. He's part English. He's part Malawian. And my Malawian side is like, I have like 4 like tribal ethnicities. So like he's like mixed, like crazy mixed. And then my friend Fatna, who is the one on the cream background to the extreme left there, she's actually Tuareg. I mean, how cool is that? So like these are the people who come from different places, who are different mixes that form my community. And I just, I would just love to make the field of dreams like even bigger,
Do you think you will? Is it?
Well,
is it
actually,
ever expanding?
the people in my family I didn't include because it
Yeah.
was like, this took me forever. I think
Yeah.
actually this took me the whole year.
I'm going to change slides. Here's an image of the mirrors that are sitting directly across. And so when you do go visit the exhibition after the talk, Billie's encouraging us all to kind of make our own Billie portraits. And you can see the reflections of the silks, in the mirror, and then, of course, yourself. And so it creates this multi-dimensional layer. I took some slides of close-ups so that you can see, this is Mika, your son, right? Yes. And Mika is a huge inspiration for many of your works, but I included a few so that everyone can kind of see the detail and how much effort and energy and hand sewing goes into each layer. It's an additive process, so it's almost sculptural what you're doing, building the surface of these portraits. And you kind of talked to me about how it's kind of a zoomed-in landscape, or of a humanscape, was what we were saying before. Kind of all the components that make up nature's humanity, and I think that that's just really beautiful and really shows through the work. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about source energy and point out that all the titles in the exhibition are kind of summoning nature in one way or another. And so source energy is a work that reminds me of something that you said in an interview I read of yours back in 2019. I love it so much. You said that the ultimate act of resistance is self-love. And I'm wondering if you can share your thoughts about your relationship with nature and its role in your act of self-love.
Yes, nature's been really huge in my life. I will make reference to another work, but I am a daughter of the soil. So especially being born in Malawi at the time when I was born in the 70s, you're just so aware of nature. I mean, as a child, I knew which berries to eat, which berries not to eat, which wild plants you could cook and which ones you couldn't cook. I mean, I don't think I could do that today. So nature has really been a part of my life, so I mean, it was imprinted in me as a child, really, and it's always something I've always looked to for solace and peace. But I'm particularly drawn to the seaside, and so in this work, Source Energy, I go to the seaside to replenish myself, probably after having worked really hard or having dealt with something really difficult. Then I'll get on a plane, book a place, and then just be by the sea. And the sea it just recharges me. It makes me feel so good. It makes me feel so connected to nature. And I mean, it's just such a powerful feeling. And also the kind of the landscape of the actual beaches themselves is very uniquely South African. And it's just so, so beautiful. I mean, you cannot think about your problems when you're in that space. And also, as someone once said to me, and I thought it was really very powerful, when you go to the sea, it's 3 elements meeting. So it's earth, sky, and water. And that's actually what makes it so energetically powerful.
Alongside this piece is a drawing, and you included several preliminary drawings in the exhibition. And have you ever shown drawings alongside the silks before?
No, this was really the first time. I mean, we did a little experimentation with my show that's touring the UK called A Quiet Fire, but it was just 2. But then for this is where I've really shown the whole scope.
Yes. It's great. I was telling Billie that Santa Fe is a community of makers, and often in the galleries in the museum, a lot of the questions that we're getting from visitors are how, not so much what, but we get a lot of how questions. And so it's a pleasure and a privilege to have these drawings alongside the silks, because it really helps people understand the process. I mean, the drawings are, they're delicious. They're beautiful, beautiful drawings. So
The drawing is the fun part for me. That's when I like put on the music. And then it's like, I just love the sound of like the pencil when it makes that sound and you get into the rhythm and it's like, oh yeah, it feels so good.
That's great. Are you stitching, you stitch them all by hand, right? So that's like the harder part, but are you just doing that like in all areas of your house? Do you just have like set up little sewing sessions?
Yeah, basically all over. So if it's like at midnight, then I'm usually in my bed and then I have to look out for pins, but sometimes I do miss some pins.
Yeah.
But it's really hard because, I hurt my hands. I mean, I'm used to it now. I have a thimble, but sometimes you actually want to feel the fabric. And the thimble, it's like you can't really feel. So yes, my hands look awful when I finish working for a show.
Yeah. This is another example of replenishing or source energy. It's called In My Element, and so both of the works are really speaking specifically to your personal relationship with water and your experience with it as a transformative force. Do you want to share anything about water as healer in your life?
Yeah, so, this says in my element, and really, like, over the years, I've realized that water is my element. So it's like, I'm not the best swimmer in the world, but like, when I immerse myself in water, like in the pool, and I go under the water, it's just like, it's the best feeling in the world. And I love to be by the sea, even though I also don't swim in the sea anymore because I was carried by a cross current and it really scared me. So I just go in about that deep, but just to be near the water is enough for me. So, and I love to take baths. So I bath not because I want to get clean, but because I just want to like just be in water and showering. So I think I clean myself a few times in a day. Well, not clean myself, but like I surround myself like with water. And I love to be in the rain. When we were walking here, she was like, "Oh, but it's raining," and I'm like, "Yes, that's like, yeah, it's."
I know. I was like, "Do you need a ride?" She was like, "No, I'm walking." I was
It's
like, "Okay."
it's so rejuvenating when you have like the rain falling on you and then you feel slightly cold. It actually like it's energizing. It really is. And obviously drinking water is like the ultimate. I mean, it's like, wow, you can actually put it inside you.
It's amazing. Do you want to drink some water now?
Not right now, thanks.
I was just realizing we have some. I'm going to go to the next slide. Sea of Love. So this is the very first piece that you made for this exhibition, and it's featuring your son, Mika, who is inspiration for many of your works, and I'd like to talk about that a little bit. But, I love this piece because it's just Mika sleeping under a duvet, but the way that you've rendered the duvet and all the different layers of colors, it feels like he's adrift, like in water. So can you talk a little bit about the role of water in this piece particularly? And then also I want to talk about this archive of Mika's life that you're creating.
Yes, so I mean, I like the word that you used just now, adrift, because I feel like dreamland is a bit like, being adrift on water, because there's something so mysterious about it. But, also, water for me is also related to emotions. So it's like when I look at Mika sleeping, I'm just overcome with emotions. Like, it's just like the love I feel for him, just as he just looks so innocent. It's just like the most beautiful thing. But it also makes me wonder, like, what kind of emotions is he having while he's asleep? So that's why, it's the sea of love, because it's like this like intensity of emotion. But also the reason that I wanted it to be quite ambiguous, that it's like the duvet, but it's like an ocean, was really just to pay tribute to like Santa Fe and the landscape and Georgia O'Keeffe's work that was also quite ambiguous. So this was really the starting point of the show.
Yeah, and can you talk to us a little bit about Mika and when you started creating portraits of him? Because he shows up in your work constantly. He's a star.
Mika's the love of my life. I really believe that having Mika taught me a lot about love. So basically, before I had Mika, I was quite like self-absorbed. I was like wanting to achieve all these accolades and all of that. It was all about achieving. And I just think that I was just being a little bit narcissistic, if I can put it that way. But then I had a child, and then suddenly it wasn't about me anymore, you know. I had to focus on somebody else. And then I realized that I loved him just because he exists. Like, he didn't have to do like flick flacks. He didn't have to buy me a car. You know, he didn't have to show up for dinner, anything like that. Just because he exists, I loved him. And I was like, wow, this is unconditional love. And so and also I think the other thing he did for me was, I used to work like all the time. Like, I would work till 2 a.m. and then I'd work from 9 to like, all I did was work. But then when I had him, I had such limited time. So I actually had to figure out how to get things done in like 3 hours. So suddenly it was like, you know, no messing about. You just have to get in there and get it done. But so for me, like, I had a real transformation as a person because of his coming into my life. And I think, you know, that's why he keeps coming up in my work, because every stage of our life together is just always a new discovery. And I still love him unconditionally, even though he calls me bro sometimes. But what can I do?
That's good, bro. So Under African Skies is a little, it's still a portrait, but it's a shift to landscape. There's a couple pieces in the show, and this is a scene, if I understand, is at Mika's school. Yes. And it's boys playing cricket, and it's this beautiful, it's very vibrant and green. I'm not sure this light is doing it much justice, but can you talk a little bit about this work?
So this work is really, it started as my kind of renewed commitment to showing up for my son's like Saturday sports events, because I actually never went, because Saturday is kind of like a good work day for me, because I don't have to like go to school or pick up or anything like that. So I would always make his dad go. And then when COVID happened, I was like, oh no, I've got to become a better parent. So I've got to like every once in a while show up for the Saturdays. So then I showed up for his cricket game on the Saturday, and it was so good to be outside. But it was also so good to be there for my son. And it was also so wonderful to see these little boys just like getting on with each other, even though they like come from different backgrounds and are of different skin tones. And I just thought children and their innocence is just such a beautiful thing, you know? But also I was also celebrating, you know, the land of my birth, just because there's so much negativity around Africa. And also we have so many struggles as Africans. You know, living in Africa is really, really hard. It's not easy. So it's kind of like, it's kind of an expression of love, you know, because there is nothing like an African sky. So this is what happens under African skies.
And I think the next slide, if I did it right, yes. This piece, A Place in the Sun.
So we're back to the beach.
Yeah, we're back at the beach. You know, you said something to me yesterday that it just stuck with me. You talked about the way that the landscape, this particular place, the landscape of this place engulfs you, and it really humbles you, and it's like this humbling quality of nature. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because I think that thread is running through all of the works.
Yes, so this is the south coast of South Africa, and I think it's the most beautiful coast of South Africa, actually. And the landscape is huge. I mean, the sand dunes on the beach just go on and on and on, and you just can't help but feel small and just be aware of the expanse of nature. And I think this exemplifies my whole kind of idea that we should be humbled by nature, because we are nature's children, and it is so much bigger than us. And even though we think that because we've invented technology and we've like gone to the moon or whatever, that it means that we're so special, but like nature is just so much bigger than us, and we are its children, and we should be humbled by it, and we should appreciate it, and we should honor it.
Yeah, and while we're on this slide, because it's a really good illustration of it, you know, I want to talk a little bit about these negative space of your pieces, and how they correlate together. Because you know, yesterday you shared with us that each, and in fact they're all of the same fabric. In many sense, you're cutting what you need from one piece of fabric, and it might show up in a different piece. Can you talk about your decision to, create these compositions in the way that you do, and then, you know, the idea of just hanging them on the wall rather than framing them or whatnot?
So for me, the negative space is really the rupture. So it's a bit like the wound that we all carry inside of us. One of the phrases I like to use is the perfect and the imperfect, because like a perfect person doesn't do very interesting things. I mean, that's the way I see it. It's usually our wounds that lead us to meet our edge and like do something really incredible. So I guess I'm just saying, like, let's wear our wounds on our sleeves and share them. And like if I get together and say, hi, my name is Billie and I'm wounded, just like own it. So that's really what it is. And I do believe that it is something that we all share as humans, is some kind of wound that we've all experienced at some point in our lives. And obviously the wounding is not to the same degree for everybody. Like some people are wounded to the point of being damaged, but some people just have like something that happened to them when they're a child, like maybe their parents forgot them at school and now they have abandonment issues, you know what I mean? Like it's different levels. But I think we should own that part of ourselves, because that's the makings of us. This happens organically. So basically like each work speaks to the other. So I don't make the negative spaces deliberately. Like if I need, so let's say that bit that's cut out on this piece, I probably needed that to make another work. And then I looked at this and I was like, hey, that's cool, that works. But as Brandee was saying, at some point I chose not to put them behind glass, because I just felt that there was a lot more intimacy when there was no barrier in between the textile piece and the viewer. And I actually witnessed that myself. I witnessed how differently people engage to my work when it's not framed.
So again, here's Mika. A little older, of course, than maybe the previous portrait that I shared with you, but he's holding two plants and he's wearing this beautiful floral jacket. And I was just curious if you could share the inspiration for this portrait. I think it's such a beautiful story, and then maybe kind of talk about how it relates to the overall themes of the exhibition, which are unity and oneness and nature.
So basically, in this piece, Mika and I were actually sitting on the patio, and I was trying to sell my house, and I couldn't sell my house. So then I said, oh, Mika, I think we have to like redecorate the patio. Like we've got to make it look so good. So he's got a really good eye. So then he was actually holding two of the pot plants on our patio, and he was going to move them somewhere else. And I was sitting at the table on our patio, and I was looking at him, and I was like, wow, like there's just something really beautiful about this. So I asked him to like pause, and he was very good. He's used to that now. He's used to like just waiting for me to get the camera. So then I went and I got my camera and I took a picture, and it became this work, Earthchild. But actually the other story behind this is that the two plants he's holding had actually been propagated from a little plant that he brought from school. And I did that with him to teach him that you can actually make a new plant out of an old one, just to like make the most of what you have. And it also speaks to like our relationship with each other, where over the years since he was a toddler up until now, we'll go to the garden shop and we'll get like vegetables and fruits, and we'll come home and we'll plant them together, and then we'll water them, and then we'll like pick them together, and then we'll eat them. Just really as a way for me to teach him, his food source and to have a relationship with nature, because I want him to respect nature and to understand where food comes from.
It's an important lesson to teach, I think, source of food and how to grow. So good on ya, good mother. Okay, so lastly, as the last of our slides at least, I'd like to talk about this series titled Breeding Ground. It's a series of self-portraits from different times of your life. And similarly to other titles of works in the show, some of these are relating to nature as well. And we've had a good time this week talking about your journey from collagen to cortisol. And so can you talk a little bit about these self-portraits and why at this time in your life you chose to reflect and look back this way?
So actually, this is called Breeding Ground, but I call it the makings of me. So it's from when I was a first-year student at university to the 50-year-old me. So basically, I turned 50 earlier this year. And I guess it just made me really nostalgic. And especially like having a show at site, I was like, wow, I remember when I was a poor, art graduate or art student, and like nobody wanted to see my work, and now I get to show at Site Santa Fe. I mean, it's like, wow, what a journey, right? So I guess this is really just acknowledging the different phases of my development, who I was and who I became, and that through all of this, Billie the artist was also becoming, not just Billie the woman. And as I said, because I have come full circle to 5-0, it just felt really important to do it.
So the portrait on the left is called Student, right? So around what age are you in this portrait?
I'm about 19, 18, 19.
And you're working from photographs?
Yes.
Yeah.
So these are all from ID photos. Like, I think the one is from my student card, and then the others are like from passport photos and ID photos and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
No vanity there. Those photos are really struggle. I don't show my license to anybody. And I'm definitely not making a portrait of it.
Yeah, I think that was the whole point, was that the photographer's anonymous, because I actually generally take the photos myself.
Yeah.
So this is, I guess, it's more documentation than anything else.
So it's student, sophomore, the one with the green background.
Yes.
Siren.
Yes, because I've got the long braids and
Yeah.
I've got like that intense gaze.
And then Sage.
Yes.
Which I love. Yeah. I feel like this is a good time. I just got my my timer to open up for questions. If anybody has any questions, I think we could take maybe 2 or 3.
In viewing even these pieces, and then after seeing the show last night, I'm a choreographer. I work with movement a lot, and so I'm curious to hear from you. What is your relationship to movement? Because I think that somehow your own embodiment is showing up in these works, and so I'm just curious to hear, like, what is your relationship to movement, and how you're bringing it about in these works.
I suppose, like, visually you do want the eye to travel. So then I do try and do what I call the push and pull, where it's like the areas where your eyes can rest and then areas that draw you in. But on a lighter note, I do tend to dance a lot when I'm working. So it's quite hard because it's like you're trying to work and then suddenly you've got like this urge to move. Yeah.
That's why all the injuries on your fingers.
Yes, exactly.
That's good. Anyone else have a question? Brave lady in the front.
I'm curious with your mirrors, how did you come up with the shapes, and also how did you come up with the different patinas that each of them show?
So the shapes are really to reflect the portraits, because my whole idea was to have people create their own Billie portrait as a kind of a collaborative piece. And the mirrors were actually done by someone in Cape Town who does the antiquing. And I wanted to do the antiquing because I just felt that it, you know, if it was just clear glass, it would have been a bit cold. So I wanted to create a little bit more warmth. And that's why I went via that route.
I'm just thinking about how personal and the biographical aspect, autobiographical aspect of your work, and separating from that, having something about yourself so close to you when you're working on it, and then giving it to an institution or letting it be seen by so many when it's all about you. I'd like to hear like how you feel about that separation, if it affects you or if that's easy.
So actually, for me, the most important part is making the work. Once it's done, and I'm done. Then we say cheers, bye-bye. It's there's no emotion. Yeah, the emotion is in the making. Yeah.
Well, I think that's it's one of the best parts of being an artist is that you, or even a curator, you put something out into the world, and then it's its own thing. You know, it has its own becoming. And everyone brings their own stories or their own life experiences or whatever. They're bringing it to the work or they're bringing it to the exhibition, and it transforms over time. And time does its thing. So, yeah.
And I make the work to share, so, you know, otherwise I just keep it for myself.
And we have one question here, sorry, and then we'll do this one after.
Yeah, I'm just fascinated by the negative space again, and I'm wondering How did that feel for you the first time you did it? Was it a decision that you made, or was it just a natural process that came along? Because it's such an integral part of your pieces as well. Was it scary when you first put it out there, or did it just seem very natural?
Actually, it was quite exciting because before that, I'd been like using regular shapes. And then when that happened, because I was saying to Brandee that it actually happened because I was let down by a guy, and he upset me so much that I needed so basically I'd had a piece where I'd cut off a piece for another work, and I was tempted to make it rectangular and perfect again, but because I had so much to say, I had a lot of emotions. I was like, no, I need that extra space over there. I need it because I've got more to say. And then, when the work was done, I was like, wow, I love this. This is great. I never have to make a regular shaped work ever again unless it feels right.
Okay, last question here.
I have another question about your negative space. Do you start with a square or rectangle, and then after the image is created and you're applying it to the background, are you then working with it and continuing to cut the space or tear the background to reflect the patterns or the shapes you're looking for that are going to reflect to the face that you've already done?
So basically, when I buy the fabric, obviously it's like a regular shaped piece of fabric. So then I will then cut off a little piece of it to put into a work. So it happens very, very organically. And if you have a look at my drawings very carefully, you'll see that I have done the outline of the backing fabric, and that it's already like that when I start. Because I think if I had to make those shapes, they would look very contrived. But it's so spontaneous and it's so organic, and the works are in conversation with each other, that no, it's not deliberate at all. It really is very accidental. Yes.
Great. Well, I just want to thank you, Billie, so much for being here and sharing all of this with us this afternoon, and thank all of you for being here to bring it to life. The show is called Field of Dreams. It's in the front gallery of the museum. It's open today and then through February 12th. So come see it again, bring your friends. It's awesome. Do some sewing. Thank you, Billie.
Well, I also just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to Lehman Mopin and Alexis Rose. Thank you. And Sight and all the people who've supported the show as well. And Santa Fe for welcoming me. It's been so incredible, and I'm so deeply appreciative. Thank you all so much.